So in America, 16th birthday is kind of a big deal. It's not like massive, but usually you might have a special party or do something a little bit unique. When I turned 16, I remember very clearly. It was a Sunday, and I often planned my own parties, like kind of told my mom, here's what I want to do and this and that. But I remember this particular one, she wouldn't let me plan anything. And so I thought, all right, okay, we're going to do something really special. And I just remember waking up on Sunday morning and my dad said, right, you ready to go to church? Because we didn't skip church for anything. And I was just really, to be honest, disappointed. I thought, really? It's my birthday? And this is what we're going to do? We're going to spend it in church? I was like, oh, okay, fine. And we come home from church, and we're literally just sitting in the living room, and it's my parents and my younger brother, who I found very annoying, and I think my grandmother and maybe an aunt or something. But that was it. There was none of my friends. There was no, like, cake. There was no balloons. There was no... And I was... unpleasant would be putting it nicely. I was just a real jerk. Like, just you imagine all of the teenage attitude. It was just bad. I don't really know how I ended up getting anything for my 16th birthday, because I just sat on the couch. I was mean and I was grumpy, and I just thought, this is a lame party. And then there was a knock on the door, and my mom said, oh, Chrissy, you need to get the door. And I said, I'm not going to get the door. I'm telling you, I was really not nice that day. But my mom made me go downstairs, so I go to the door, my brother running down, because it was a surprise for him too, because he couldn't have kept it otherwise. And so we opened the front door, and there's a strange man there, and I'm a bit like, okay, who are you? Why do I want to talk to you? And then I look behind him and realize there's a giant limousine behind him. And of course I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And so I go running out to the limo, and we're looking in it, and my brother's like, woo, And I remember mom says, okay, well, you can get in. It's going to take us to the restaurant. Now, we went to the Olive Garden, which is like the equivalent of an okay pub. Like, it's just a sit-down family restaurant, nothing too fancy. But I was excited because I was going to ride to the Olive Garden in a limousine. So my brother and I climb in, and it's stocked with sodas. So we're pouring ourselves sodas in the fancy glasses. And I was such a jerk that literally, as we're leaving from my house, and my parents drive separately in the van, I remember thinking, man, this is really cool, but I wish my friends were here with me. A few minutes later, we pulled into the parking lot of my school, and of course, there were all of my friends, because they were going to come, and it was a surprise, and it was great. We went to the Olive Garden, we had a good time. We rode home in the van, because my parents could only afford to pay for us to go to the restaurant in the limo, not home again. But it was great. I had a good time, even if I was a jerk. So what's the moral of the story? One is, don't be a jerk on your birthday. But the other moral of the story is, we don't know what the future holds. You see, I had come home from church, and I had decided that my birthday was going to be terrible, and that it was the worst day ever, and my life had been ruined, because what I saw, it told me it couldn't be good. The circumstances didn't line up with what I thought was going to happen. I didn't know what the future would hold. And we see a similar story in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 to 21. Jesus tells a parable of a man, and his story is in some ways maybe worse than mine, better than mine. His circumstances looked better than mine did, right? He had an abundant year as a farmer. He had all the crops, and he said, I need to build bigger storehouses. He focused all his time and energy on acquiring wealth and acquiring things. And Jesus' response to this, the way that this man chose to live his life, was he said that he was a fool. Because just as he'd acquired all the wealth and thought, now I can sit back and enjoy life, it was then that he was going to die, and he couldn't take any of it with him. And so Jesus gives us this parable in order to ask a question, because remember, we're looking at this, how does the gospel transform us? And the question that I think Jesus is asking us in this parable is, if time is finite, what is it that you value? If time, and I shouldn't say if, because we know that it is, but if time is finite, what is it that you value? You see, in Luke 10, we were reminded that we need to pursue God and love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We had that picture of Mary and Martha, Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus. If time is finite, do I pursue that kind of relationship with Jesus? Or am I pursuing storing up in houses, storing up all of the things so that I can sit back, relax, and go caravanning on the weekend? So I can sit back and relax and have all the free time to do all the things that I want to do in my life. So I'm going to work really hard now, and I'll get to Jesus later. is Jesus looking at us saying, you're such a fool. You're wasting the time and the resources that you've been given. You see, the reality is that what you value always shows up in what you do with your finite resources. If you're not sure, because this is the problem, isn't it? It's the hypocrisy. The Pharisees that Jesus is talking about at the beginning of this chapter, they said all the right things. And for some of us, we say all the right things. In fact, sometimes I think we can say the right things for so long, we start to believe it, even if our actions don't show it. We don't realize that we're being hypocrites sometimes. But Jesus is helping us to see that what we do with our finite resources will demonstrate to us and to others what we value. What you do with your time, what you do with your money, what you do with your resources, your car and your house, and whatever things you have at your disposal, what you do with those things will demonstrate what it is that you value. Are you investing it into a good life for yourself, or your kids, or your family in the future? Or do you invest it in the kingdom? Do you invest it in the things that God is doing and that God is at work doing? The gospel should transform us from the inside out. And in one way that it transforms us is it should transform what it is that we value. It should transform the way that we use our finite resources. In Psalm chapter 90, verse 12, the psalmist writes, "Teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom." I think that that's an apt place to end, that's the prayer that we should have, that God transform me from the inside out and teach me to number what is finite about my life and to be wise with what you've given me so that what I value represents what it is that I say that I believe.